Hilchos Shabbos, Perek Shnei Asar, Laws of Shabbos, chapter 12. Today is quite an exciting day. The Rambam concludes his exhaustive delineation of the definitions and parameters of all of the 39 melachot. We've done 36 so far in the last couple of chapters, and today we get the last three: kindling, extinguishing, and taking from one domain to another, the melacha of carrying. That we only begin the conversation today. The next 7 chapters till the end of chapter 19 are occupied with this one melacha of hotza'ah mirshut l'rshut, transferring from one domain to another. But today we begin the conversation nevertheless, and before that we talk about lighting a fire and extinguishing. Let's get right to it. Halacha Aleph, hamav'ir kol shehu, somebody who kindles, who lights a fire even in the minutest amount, chayav, he's held liable. V'hu, that is provided sheyehet tzarich la'efer, that you require the ash. Otherwise, lighting a fire is simply destructive. But when you want the ash that's being produced, now you're doing something constructive. What if you're lighting a fire just for warmth or for light? That's also purposeful. We'll soon see about that. Aval, says the Rambam, but im hiv'ir derech hashchata, if you simply lit a fire by way of destructibility, you just wanted to get rid of stuff, patur, you're exempt. Because you are destructive, and a destructive person, based on the guiding principle in chapter 1, is exempt on Shabbat. However, there are some times when you have something constructive emotionally, even if it looks destructive. Somebody who burns down the grain pile belonging to his friend or burns his house down, chayav, you're liable, even though your act is a destructive act. Because your intent is to take revenge from your enemy. And at the end of the day, your mind has cooled, your anger has subsided, and you can be considered like somebody who tears a cloth over a person that's dead, or in anger, where you're liable, like somebody who wounds his friend during a fight. All of these people can be considered doing something constructive relative to their evil inclination. Now says the Rambam, if somebody lights a candle or somebody lights some wood, for a very simple purpose of warmth or light, you're also held liable. That's also the main category, the primary category of lighting a fire. One who heats up iron in order to harden it later in water. That's how you do it. You take iron, you make it red hot, then you put it in water and it gets super hard, turning it into steel. That's a derivative of the melacha of kindling, and you'd be held liable. Earlier in chapter 9, the Rambam spoke about heating up metals and put you liable on account of cooking. What's the difference between metals and irons? Rav Kapach, one of the famous commentators in the Rambam, once said that when you heat up other metals, they become more pliable. When you heat up iron, they actually become harder. So when you're talking about cooking, which is taking one entity, turning it into another entity, by heating up metals, making them pliable, you have cooked them. When it comes to iron, you're simply making them harder by virtue of making them red hot. That goes into the category simply of lighting the fire of kindling. There's a fascinating talk from the Rebbe that the Rebbe delivered on the 1-year anniversary after his wife's passing. Chav Beis Shvat Tafshin Mem Test, 22nd of Shvat, 1989. Rebbe Tzin Chaim Mushka, his wife, passed away in 1988. 1 year later, he gave a talk on this paragraph in the Rambam, and he asked the question: shouldn't, if you had to list the order of lighting a fire, wouldn't you first put the simple case of lighting a fire when you light a fire for warmth or for light? Later on, you could put about lighting a fire to get ash. That would seem like a secondary purpose. The main purpose would seem to be to light up or to warm up. Especially since there's a famous argument among the sages, in defining every one of the 39 melachot. There's many ways, many perspectives of looking at each melacha. When it comes to making a fire, there's somewhat of an argument among the contemporary or later commentators as to what is the core of the problem of kindling. Is it burning up the fuel, or is it increasing flame? Some opinions hold it's the fact of burning up the fuel. The Alter Rebbe in his Shulchan Aruch writes, in the name of the Rambam, that the definition of the malacha of kindling is ribui ha'esh, increasing the fire. So if the whole core of the malacha as defined by the Rambam is increasing the fire, he should first write the case of kindling to get a fire, to get warmth or light, and later on write about a case of lighting a fire to get ash. Says the Rebbe on a deeper level. He doesn't go into the legalities of it. On the pnimiyuta inyanim, the inner message. The reason that we have 39 melachot on Shabbat is because these are the types of labor that's required to make God's home in this world. That's why, by the way, we learn the melachot from the Mishkan, because the Mishkan was when that vision came to reality for the first time. God had a home on this earth. And whatever it took to make that home becomes a Torah important labor. It means that in the service of God, these are the things that we have to do. When we look at it from that perspective, and you talk about kindling a fire, when a Jew is on fire, the highest, most important type of fire is the fire that produces ash. Why? What's a fire? A fire represents when a person is inspired. His soul, when you say your soul is on fire, a person is emotionally charged, is on a spiritual high. If that high leaves him without ash, without a tangible product, without some way of carrying down the inspiration and making it part of his daily life, he hasn't lit the fire truly. The test, whether your fire is true, is if it produces ash. The ashes has to be the end goal, and it's also the litmus test to know whether your fire was a true inspiration. Of course, the Rambam adds, at the end of the day, if you made a fire in your soul simply to light up your soul, to warm up your soul, and it didn't bring to a tangible product, that's also okay. You brought more holiness into the world. But the primary fire that a Jew has to be the one that creates ash, has to be the one that brings something physical. It carries down and it makes a change. It manifests in the way we live our lives on the most practical level. All right, halacha bet. Let's turn to the next malacha of hamechabeh. Kibui. A person who extinguishes a fire, kol shehu, even the minutest amount, chayav, you're liable. Echad hamechabeh taner ve'echad hamechabeh tagachelet shaletz. This applies whether you put out a candle or you put out a flaming wood coal. Wood means coal that's been produced from something that's flammable fuels. But a person who extinguishes what's called a metal coal, which basically means red hot metal, you pour water over it and you decrease the heat, patur, you're exempt. That isn't actually putting out a real fire. You haven't created another entity. But if by putting the water onto this hot metal, you wanted to harden it, chayav, now your extinguishment has a purpose and you're liable. That's how people that heat up iron do. I saw the picture before there. Just bring it back. You heat up the iron until it becomes red hot. And then you put it right into water to harden it. That's the act that's called in Hebrew litzaref, to further combine the metal, the iron. Where you do it, you're held liable. That's a derivative of the malacha of extinguishing. You're allowed to extinguish a glowing metal, red hot piece of metal in the public square in order to protect the multitudes from getting damaged. It's malacha she'einat tzricha legufa. Even though according to the Rambam you're exempt, in this case to protect people, since the whole thing is rabbinic. To extinguish a metal glowing piece of metal is only rabbinic in nature, so you're allowed to do it to protect the public. Hanoten shemen l'toch haner hadolek, a person who adds some fuel into a lit candle, chayav mishum mav'ir, is liable on account of kindling. A person who takes out oil from an oil lamp, chayav mishum mechabeh, is liable on account of extinguishing. Excuse me, the pictures aren't exactly in order, that's why I'm flipping around. Halacha gimel dleika shenafla b'Shabbat. A house goes on fire. There's a massive fire on Shabbos. If somebody extinguishes it just because of the loss of money involved, there's no people in the house, no danger to life. Of course, if there was, you can certainly extinguish it. But if you're doing it just to protect the money, chayav, you're liable for extinguishing. Loss of money does not push away, does not suspend the Shabbos, only loss of life. Lefichach, therefore, says the Rambam, when you have a house on fire, yetzu b'nei adam kedei shelo yamutu. Everybody should exit, so they shouldn't die. V'yanichu ha'esh telahet, let the fire burn, let the flames rage. V'afilu sorefet kol dirato kula, even if it burns up the entire living quarters. Now, I should note that the Shulchan Aruch rules that melacha she'ein tzricha legufa patur. When you do it a melacha not for the express original intent for which it was intended for, you'd be exempt. Extinguishing flames to save money would put you in that category. And therefore, according to the Shulchan Aruch, there are many leniencies when it comes to a house on fire or belongings on fire, especially since today's day and age. If you allow the fire to spread, it could reach certain things in the house, which could then set off explosions and make the destruction that much worse. So consult your rabbi. There's much room for leniency today's day and age when we have a fire going on at home, even if there is no danger to life. Halacha dalid mutar la'asot mechitza b'chol hakelim. You can make a mechitza, a wall made out of all vessels, bein milein, bein rekanim, whether they're full, whether they're empty, kedei shelo ta'avor ad leka, so that the fire should not pass. Afilu klei cheres chadashim milein mayim, even if you have new clay vessels full of water, and you know if they burst, the water is going to put out the flames. Osin mehen mechitza, you can construct a partition out of them, even though they're going to certainly split open and put out the fire, because indirect extinguishing is allowed on Shabbos. You can also do some preventive extinguishing, not exactly extinguishing, but you put a little plate over a lamp, so long as you leave some room for oxygen, some room for breathing, in order that it shouldn't catch fire to the roof. Halacha hey, teva, shida, umigdal, she'achaz behen ha'ur. If you have a little box, or a closet, or a chest, and the fire catches onto them. Mevi or gedi. What you do is you bring the hide of a goat, or anything similar, midvarim she'ein ha'ur melahetet otan, something which is not flammable. It won't catch fire. Uporso, al hakatzeh she'adayin lo nisraf. Stretch it over the part of the chest, storage container, which hasn't yet been burnt, so that the fire will not pass. You're not actively extinguishing it, but you're not allowing the fire to proceed further. A talis, a cloak, or a regular talis which caught fire. Stretch it out, put it on. Make some motions that will have it be exposed to fast blowing air, and if it goes out, it goes out. The same thing if chas v'shalom. God forbid a Torah catches fire, a Torah scroll catches fire, poshto the korebo, quickly open it and read it. If that causes the flames to go out, no problem. You should also pour water on this side, which hasn't yet caught fire. And if that causes the fire to go out, then the fire goes out. Shulchan Aruch says you should not use water, you should use other liquids, because water could get you into another problem of milaben, the malacha of laundering. Shachach ner daluk al gabei tavla. You forgot a clay lamp, oil lamp, on a wooden board. This is a wooden table, but let's say the top board was detachable. Mina'eret hatavla v'hu nofel. You're allowed to shake the piece of wood and allow the clay lamp to fall. V'im kava, kava. And if it goes out, it goes out. Aval hinichomi ba'eret. But if you had placed it there in the evening, you didn't forget it there, you placed it there purposely, afal pisha kava. Even if it's not lit, it already went out, asur l'taltelo, you're not allowed to move it, because the entire table became what's called a basis l'davar ha'asur, a base for something forbidden. Shabbos entered, and the table was in a state where it was serving something which is muktzah. We're going to learn about this much later in the end of Hilchos Shabbat. And therefore, you cannot move the candle once it's sitting on the table. As a matter of fact, this has practical applications even today. If you light Shabbat candles on your dining room table and it isn't yet set, it's kind of empty, that's going to cause the entire table to become basis l'davar ha'asur. You won't be able to clear the tablecloth afterwards. It's going to make major problems. Many people have a custom to put a siddur or a holy book next to the candles when you light them. That way it causes the table to be serving both something permitted and something forbidden. And again, we're going to discuss this more in detail in the laws of muktzah later on in the 20s, as we get further along in Hilchos Shabbat. There's a very important question raised here by the commentaries. How can you shake a lit candle off of a table if it's going to for sure go out? That's called psik reisha. You do something that causes an unavoidable consequence on Shabbat, you're still liable for that. How could the Rambam say that it's allowed? So some commentaries suggest that we're talking about a wax candle or an oil candle where all the oil has already been eaten up, so it's on its last minutes, and by throwing it off the table, it won't necessarily go out. Others say it's psik reisha deloi michole. It's an unavoidable consequence which you don't want. You want the candle to stay lit. Even if it goes out, it's not a problem. Halacha zayin nochri sheba lechabot. If you have a goy who comes to extinguish a fire, we had this already in chapter 6, ein omrim lo kabeh ve'al techabeh. We do not give him direct instructions. Extinguish here, don't extinguish there. Because the obligation for him to rest on Shabbos isn't incumbent upon us. But if a child comes to extinguish, ein shomin lo, we don't allow him, we don't listen to him, we don't let him do it. There's an express commandment in the 10 Commandments that your children and your sons and your daughters have to rest on Shabbos as well. That's only if he's acting on the knowledge of his father. But if he came on his own volition and wants to put out the fire, the high court does not need to stop him. In addition, when it comes to a fire, they allowed a Jew to announce, whoever puts out this fire, I can guarantee you're not going to lose. And if Gentiles here, or if children here, and they come and put out the fire, they may get rewarded and you may end up with a saved home. And now we move on to the next topic, which is going to occupy us for the next week. Hotza'ah mirshut lirshut, the melacha of carrying from one domain to another domain. Says the Rambam, Hotza'ah mirshut lirshut, melacha me'avot melachot hi. Carrying from one domain to another is one of the fathers, one of the primary labors that are forbidden on the Shabbos. Even though this matter was communicated together with all the body of Torah from the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai, there's a clear reference, nevertheless, to this melacha specifically. Harehu omer b'Torah, It says in the Torah, when Moshe Rabbeinu collected the donations for the Mishkan, after a while the donations piled up, there was so much. It says in the Torah, Ish v'isha al ya'asu od melacha litrumat hakodesh. Moshe sent an announcement around the camp. Men and women, stop bringing more stuff to the holy donations. Vayikaleh ha'am mehavi, and people stopped bringing. What do you see in the verse? Look at the highlighted words. Mehavi, bringing, is called milacha. It's called a work, a labor. Halamadata shehahava'a milacha koreota. Here you see that bringing in something from one domain to another is called labor by the Torah. In addition, from tradition, we learn that not just transferring from one domain to another is what's forbidden. The one who transfers in the public domain from the beginning of the space of 4 amot, 4 cubits, about 6 feet, to the end of 4 cubits, in other words, if you walk 4 cubits carrying something, that's akin, that's like transferring something from one domain to another. And at the end of this chapter, we're going to define exactly what that means, 4 amot. Says the Rambam halakha tet, let's start learning some rules about carrying. Ein hamotzi mireshut lirshut chayav. One who carries, one who takes out something from one domain to another is only liable ad sheyotzi kishiur hamoil. He has to take out an amount that's considered to be beneficial, and we're going to define that in chapter 18, a whole chapter on what is considered a beneficial volume for carrying many individual species. Mireshut hayachid lirshut harabim. You have to take it out from a private domain to a public one, or for a public one to a private one. In chapter 14, we're going to define exactly what makes a public and a private domain. Another core condition is that you have to uproot it. You have to pick up the object from one possession, from one domain, and place it down in the other domain. You have to do both parts of the act. You must both lift it and place it. But if a situation arose where you were the one to lift it, but you didn't put it down in the next domain, you simply walked there and handed it off to someone else, or you were the one not to lift it, just the one to put it in the next domain, or you took out less than the beneficial amount, patur, you are exempt. Rabbinically forbidden, biblically exempt. Somebody who carries something from the beginning of 4 cubits to the end of 4 cubits in the public domain is only obligated if he lifts it on the first edge of the 4 amot and places it on the last edge of the 4 cubits. And we're going to soon see different elements, different ways that this halakha will take shape. Hazorek mireshut lirshut. Here's a cute little video here. You got a baby playing catch with a dog. Throws the ball over. Boom, the dog catches it. Dog comes back over and throws it. Hazorek mireshut lirshut o hamoshit. Somebody who throws from one domain to another. He isn't carrying it. He's simply throwing it. You could think maybe you didn't lift it, you didn't put it down, you didn't do both parts. O hamoshit. Or you pass. Pass means you're just simply passing from hand to hand. A maneuver of passing. Some say it even includes dragging. That's a derivative of carrying, and you're going to be obligated for that. When you throw something, it's lifting up from your hand, and it's being placed. It has a hanachad. It lands in the other domain. Of course, we'll see many details about this coming up in the coming chapters. Same thing if you're in the public domain and you throw or you pass with your hands 4 cubits, the distance of 4 cubits. That's a derivative of the malacha of carrying, and you're liable. Somebody who throws in an abnormal manner, patur, is exempt. If you take out only a part of an object from one of these 2 domains into the other domain, patur, you are exempt, till you take out the entire object from one domain to the other. For example, you have a massive log, and you drag it out of your house halfway out the door. So you brought part of the log into the public domain, but you didn't bring the whole thing. So that doesn't count to make you liable. You have a box full of stuff. Here's a box full of Lego. Even if it's full of small mustard seeds. And you took the majority out from one domain to the other. Here, there's more reason to think that you should be liable. Because every individual object can be looked at on its own. And technically, each piece of Lego, as it gets pushed out the door, is leaving the private domain to the public domain. Nevertheless, says the Rambam, patur, you are exempt, ad sheyotzi et kol hakupa, till you take the entire box out. Why? Because since they're sitting in the box makes them into one unit, and you're only obligated if the entire thing goes out. The same thing will become in all similar situations, because the vessel, the utensil, the container, makes everything that's sitting inside of it like one object. Unlike when it comes to writing, writing has to be done in the normal way, and only with the right hand. But if you did it with the left hand or your mouth, it wouldn't be considered writing. By contrast, says the Rambam, hamotzi, when it comes to carrying, ben bimino, ben bismalo, no matter which hand you took it out with, ben betocheko, whether you took it in your bosom, or sheyatza b'ma'ot tzrurin lo bisdino, or you went out with money that was wrapped up in your pouch, or like today's equivalent in your pocket, you weren't actually carrying it, chayav, you'd be liable, because you have carried things the way normal people carry them. Same thing if you carry something on your shoulder. Here's a guy carrying a bike on his shoulder. Chayav, you'd be liable. Even though the load may end up being at a height that's higher than 10 handbreadths in the public domain. And coming up, we're going to learn that if you're in a public domain, any area that's above 10 handbreadths is considered to be makom ptur, a place of exemption and not part of the public domain. Nevertheless, here the rabbis made a special exemption, or inclusion to the prohibition, that even though you're carrying it on a level which is technically not called the public domain, since we find in the Torah that carrying on the shoulder was something that was done in association with the Holy Temple, it makes you liable. So was the carrying of the children of Kehat, the family of Kehat from the tribe of Levi. When they carried the tabernacle around in the desert, they would carry it on their shoulders at a height of higher than 10 tfachim, higher than 10 handbreadths. Shneimar, as it says, that when Moshe apportioned the wagons, he gave wagons to the other two families, but livnei Kahat lo natan. He didn't give to the children of Kahat, ki avodat hakodesh alehem, because the holy service was on them. Bakatef yisa'u. The Rambam says they should carry it on their shoulders. And all forbidden labors are learned from the Mishkan. Since in the Mishkan they carry it on their shoulders, on Shabbat, when you carry on your shoulders, you're also held liable. But if somebody were to take something out in an abnormal way, somebody who carries in the back of his hand, or on his foot, like the guy with the soccer ball, somebody carrying something in his mouth, and under his armpit, by his ear, or by his hair, you have a huge earring over here, or the shaitel carrying the bottle like we saw the other day in chapter 2. So in all these cases, uvikis shetafur bivigdo, or on a pouch that's tied, that's sewn to your clothing, upia kis lemata, and it's not facing upright, it's facing face down. That isn't normal. Ben beged lebeged, or you carry something between two pieces of clothing, befi vigdo, or in the hem of your clothing, or the cuff of your pants, let's say. Beminalo, besandalo, or in your shoes and your sandals, patur. In all these cases, you are exempt. Shelo hotzi kederech hamotziin, because you're not considered to be taking it out in the way that normal people would carry stuff. Somebody who takes out a load on his head, a massive load on his head. Let's assume it was a very heavy load. Could go in sack, maleo, teva, migdal, v'chayotze behen, a full sack, or a big box, or a big chest, something like that. Where you put it on your head, and you have to hold it with your hands. If you don't hold it with your hands, you're like doing one of those balancing, Indian balancing acts. That's a talent. That's not the regular way people carry stuff. It's a big load. You're carrying it with your hands. Chayav, you're liable. Sheken derech hamotzi, and that's the way that normal people carry. And that can be considered as though you're carrying on your shoulder or on your hands. But if you were to take a light object, you put a piece of clothing or a book or a knife on your head and you took it out, not holding it by your hands. Some commentators say even if you were. Point is, it's a light object. Then you're exempt, because nobody carries light stuff on their head. Nobody, most of the world doesn't take out stuff sitting on their heads. When a person transfers an object from the beginning to the end of 4 cubits in the public domain, even though you transferred it holding it above your head, chayav, you're nevertheless liable. That's the normal way of people to transfer stuff. The only prohibition is to transfer something, to carry something the distance of 4 cubits. But so long as you stay within the square of 4 cubits where you're standing next to, you can move around stuff. And you can carry in the entire square. We're soon going to define this square on a little bit of a deeper level. Point is, you're standing in the middle. Some commentaries say you have 4 amot to each side. Simple meaning of the Rambam is that you're in the middle, you have 2 amot to each side to go. Because that way you hit the square of a distance of 4 amot. Interestingly, this is a personalized measurement. We go by your amah. In other words, typically I give the measurement of an amma as being 1.5 feet, 18 inches, but technically the legal definition of an amma is the distance from the elbow to the top of the middle finger. So we make it a personal thing. Measure your own elbow to your own middle finger, and 4 of those is what you have to carry around yourself. Unless you were a midget, then we allow him the 4 amot like an average person. We learn from tradition. When it says in the Torah, right by the man, that Hashem is going to give the double portion of the man on Friday, you don't have to go out to collect. It says, Shvu ish tachtav, each man should stay in his place. The sages say that means don't sit in your place, sit in one chair all Shabbos. Of course, you can walk around. The point is, that a person should not carry outside the square of 4 amot in a public domain. Only in the square you could carry, which is the average length of a person, the height of a person when he will stretch out his hands and feet. There alone you could carry. The Rambam seems to be hinting an allusion to rebuff the tzdukim, the Sadducees, who understood the Torah literally and would literally sit in their place on Shabbos and not move. Rambam says, no, of course not, that's allowed. The point is, in the public domain, you don't move more than 4 amot. Says the Rambam, hayu shnayim. Let's say you have 2 people. Miktzat arba amot shel zeh letoch arba amot shel zeh. Based on where they're standing, their area of 4 amot merges. You can see over here, you have person A and person B, and C is the area where their 4 amot merge. Says the Rambam, mivi'in v'ochlim b'ayim, so they can bring food and eat together in the middle in their shared space. But this person, the one on this side, shouldn't cross the sea line into his friend's 4 amot. If there were 3 people, and the middle one was swallowed in between them, logically, the middle guy can mix with the 2 on the side, and they're permitted to mix with him. But the 2 outer ones are forbidden to mix with each other. Therefore, very interestingly, because 2 people can mix their borders, so we can have what's called the bucket brigade. Olden times, when there wasn't fire trucks available and there was a fire that broke out, people used to come together and pass buckets one to the other till the point of the fire, pass the buckets back, and this way the water was filled up and passed around very easily. So it's permitted for a person to uproot an object in the public square. Pass it over to his friend who is with him in the space of 4 amot. And the friend can pass to the next friend that's next to him, even if there are 100 people. Even though the object will then be transferred multiple milin. A mil is about 1 kilometer of space. It can go for miles. Mutar, it's all permitted, because each individual only carried the bucket in his square, which was permitted. I should note, however, that the Ravid says that this permission to make a bucket brigade is only in a very pressing situation. The Talmud gives the example of a person who finds tefillin on the street. You can bring it in to a house by means of this method. But stamazoi, just like that, to use this method, you shouldn't use it. However, in Shulchan Aruch, they rule like the Rambam, and the pressing situation of which the Talmud speaks, over there they say even an individual can take care of the problem. Let's say you find tefillin on the road, you're allowed to move, less than 4 amot, and then stop, less than 4 amot, and then stop, and by yourself get the object from outside in the public to inside in the private. But on the legal level, the Rambam rules, bucket brigades are totally fine. Let's talk for a moment about the 4 amot concept. If you think about it, when we talk about 4 amot by 4 amot, we have a square, 4 cubits by 4 cubits. But if you draw a diagonal across the line of 4 amot, it's actually, that diagonal is a little longer than 4 cubits. It's 5 3/5. Says the Rambam, Ho'il v'yesh lo le'adam l'taltel b'chol ha'merubah, shu 4 amot al 4 amot. Since a person is allowed to carry in the entire square, which is 4 by 4 cubits in length and width, nimtza metaltel be'orech al achsono shel merubah zeh, so technically he can walk a maximum distance on the diagonal of the square, 5 amot u'shlosha chumshei amah, of 5 3/5 of an amah. Lefichach, therefore, because of that, technically every person can say, so long as he moved it less than 5 3/5, he hasn't technically moved it 4 amot. Somebody who transfers or throws an object in the public domain is not going to be held liable till he transfers the object 5 3/4 amas. And therefore, any place in these halachot that we're going to employ the terminology of moving something from the beginning to the end of 4 cubits, that's what we mean. Or if we say that you transferred 4 amot, you're liable It's from here to here, from the beginning of the diagonal until the end. And if you transfer less than that amount, you're exempt. Halacha Yutet Nimtza, turns out, Kan Shalosh Midot. We have 3 measurements, 3 levels of liability. Keita, what does that mean? Ha'oker chefetz mershut harabim mimakom zeh, v'yinicho b'makom acher b'shut harabim. If you were to pick up an object in the public domain, transfer it, and move it to somewhere else in the public domain, you would have to ask yourself 3 questions. If there was less than 4, literally 4 cubits between the beginning and the end, that's totally permitted. You're moving in your own square. But if there was more than 4 amot, but they're still within the length of 5 3/5 of an amma, patur, it's rabbinically forbidden, but biblically exempt. Once you reach the distance of 5 3/5 of an amma, even if it's exact, and certainly if it's more, you are then held liable on a biblical level, because you have transferred the object outside the diagonal of the 4 amma square, in which case you're certainly biblically held liable.